Let's go, Michael.
In the modern world, that's just a non-starter, and it's way inefficient. Right? Now, they call themselves Bayesian, which is kind of interesting. So you think that they were statisticians, and I've sort of said this, the contracts don't have much statistics or any in it. They say, of course, we're Bayesian. And you say, okay, I see there's a probability distribution there, and there's an expectation there. But that probability distribution, that's the prior. And you're just taking an expectation over the prior, and you never update the prior.
You never update the prior.
That's pretty limited Bayesian.
Yeah, we need to update our prior, especially in this ranking thing. Let me add a bit more.
In my view. So we have a great opportunity here to work on this problem. All right, so let's make this concrete. As you all know, clinical trials run every year, and it costs tens of millions of dollars per disease, basically. And they're hugely important. The vaccines would not have happened if the protocols had not been worked out for clinical trials. Immense social investment. It's clearly a statistics problem, but it's also a information asymmetry problem. The FDA's job is to run the clinical trials, so they're trying to control false positives and false negatives, type 1, type 2 errors. And they do. They're really good statisticians there. And they use the latest classification technology and all to do that. All right? On the other hand, which drugs do they test? They don't figure out which drugs to test. They're not being scientists. They get the drug companies to send them candidate drugs. And now the drug companies know more than the FDA about the particular drug. So they may have done some internal testing, they may have put their best engineer on it, they may know something, they'll know things about it. All right? The FDA is trying to figure out how many people to run in this clinical trial, how much expense to pay, you know, what's the risk, and so on. They could just ask the drug company, what do you think for that drug you're about ready to send me? How risky is it? How likely should it be licensed? I'm going to sit over there, I'm going to lie. I'm going to say, it's a really wonderful drug. You should definitely go to the market. So the incentives are wrong, and that in fact leads to bad use. They may have done some internal testing, they may have put their best engineer on it, they may know something, they'll know things about it. All right? It's drug tens of millions of dollars per disease, basically. And they're hugely important. The vaccines would not have happened if the protocols had not been worked out for clinical trials. Immense social investment. It's clearly a statistics problem, but it's also a information asymmetry problem. The FDA's job is to run the clinical trials, so they're trying to control false positives and false negatives, type 1, type 2 errors. And they do. They're really good statisticians there. And they use the latest classification technology and all to do that. All right? On the other hand, which drugs do they test? They don't figure out which drugs to test. They're not being scientists. They get the drug companies to send them candidate drugs. And now the drug companies know more than the FDA about the particular drug. So they may have done some internal testing, they may have put their best engineer on it, they may know something, they'll know things about it. All right? The FDA is trying to figure out how many people to run in this clinical trial, how much expense to pay, you know, what's the risk, and so on. They could just ask the drug company, what do you think for that drug you're about ready to send me? How risky is it? How likely should it be licensed? I'm going to sit over there, I'm going to lie. I'm going to say, it's a really wonderful drug. You should definitely go to the market. So the incentives are wrong, and that in fact leads to bad behavior. And you see this all the time. The FDA is aware of this. Here's a typical
bad drugs is theta 0, good drug theta 1, P approve is 0.05, 0.8, non-approve 0.95, 0.20. Is this a good protocol? What about it? If it's a bad drug, and probability of approve is 0.05. And if it's a good drug, the probability of approve is 8. Is it a good or bad thing? Small profit, 20 million cost to run trial. Oh, trial costs 200 if approved. Profit theta 0 is -10. Case 2, large profit, 20 million cost to run the trial, 2 billion if approved. Profit 80 million if theta is 0 or theta is 1. Oh, two cases different. Alpha fluva are good drugs. Many bad drugs are approved. If you put the reward too high for approval.
Type 1, type 2 error control test for the FDA. It's Neyman Pearson. False positive probability is 0.05. False negative is 0.2, kind of typical numbers. Here, a bad drug means not a drug that hurts people. They definitely screen for that, but a drug that just doesn't do anything. There are tons of such drugs out there. The company that is sending that up doesn't know that it's a bad drug. They may suspect it is, but they send it anyway, hoping for a false positive. It'll be approved. They'll make some amount of money for some amount of time.
Hoping for false positive.
To some other drug that comes onto the market, and that happens all the time. So let's think this through a minute. This protocol is an optimal protocol from a statistical point of view, but it's not an optimal point of view from an econ statistics point of view. Suppose that we're in a case where there's small profit to be made. So it costs 20 million to run the trial, 200 million if approved, kind of a typical for a very small drug. I, the CEO, and the FDA can both do a calculation. We don't know if theta is equal to 0 or not, but we can condition on it counterfactually and compute the expected profit, and in this setting, it's minus 10 million. So the CEO is now incentivized to not send the candidates up there unless they're really pretty convinced it's a good drug. So now the FDA is very happy. Mostly they're getting good drug candidates, and they then test them and so on. What if it costs 20 million to run a trial and you make 2 billion if approved? That would be more like ibuprofen or something like that. Here, if you do the same calculation, the expected profit, if the drug were actually bad, it would be 80 million. So the CEO is very incentivized to send tons of such candidates to the FDA, hoping the FDA will screen them effectively. But the FDA has a type 1, type 2 error control problem, and they make lots of false positives. Okay, so I hope you see this is
they overwhelm FDA, and some of them will get approved.
A contract theory problem. We have a principal and we have an agent. We have information asymmetries. What's new here is that we have a statistical test in the middle of that. Okay, our contract will have service, price, and outcome of statistical test. And the goal is not just to kind of calculate some expected value. The goal is to make sure that overall type 1, type 2 error of the whole system with incentives is controlled.
With incentives.
So incentive compatibility meets type 1, type 2 error control. So long story short, I don't want to get into details in this talk, but we have written now several papers, and we're in the middle of writing several more that develop a thing we're calling statistical contract theory. And so just roughly what it is, the agent has private information, their type. There's a protocol which they pay some kind of a pay-to-play price, a reservation price R. If they opt in, if they could just walk away, that's fine. But if they opt in, they pay that. They choose a payout function from a menu. I'll say a little bit what that payout function looks like, but it's kind of like service price. Then there's a statistical trial, so this is what's new, that comes from a distribution that's indexed by this type. All right. Having gotten that, the agent then receives a payoff indexed by that random variable. The principal gets a utility indexed by that random variable and the true type, because the FDA over the years will sort of pay for it, look bad if they approve too many bad drugs. Okay, so that's the setup. And the agent is doing best response in this setting, and then we work out kind of what does the incentives look like in this setting. So this slide's kind of a little bit busy, but it's just really, really simple. You have to, if you're going to do statistics meets economics, mechanism design, the first thing is what are the incentives? Are we incentive aligned, incentive compatible? And so we just wrote down incentive compatibility conditions. It should be the case that the agent's expected profit is less than or equal to 0. and that is the expected profit under the null condition. So this is kind of a null hypothesis condition for incentive aligned. All right, so you write those down, and all right, and then you sort of say, okay, now how are we going to gather statistical evidence here? Are we going to get p-values, or what are we going to do? Is it it's Neyman Pearson, but maybe it's a little different? And the short answer is that you don't use p-values, you use something else called e-values. And I don't know if you're, again, the audience is maybe not yet statistical enough to know, but e-values are an alternative to p-values, where a p-value is a tail probability under the null. An e-value is the expectation is a random variable whose expectation is less than or equal to 1 under the null. Okay, so if you know a little bit of martingales, this looks like kind of a super martingale, and that's the bigger picture. So these are super martingales that are bounded below. And so we have a theorem that says that a contract is incentive aligned if all the payoff functions are A-values, if and only.
Oh, one other thing. Even for my data market works, we never had the case where the environment was a rational player, like a consumer that cares about their privacy. Like if omega is something about consumer, how much of it they want to share with the platform. Actually, you know what? To me, well, I think the rest of this thing is just explaining their own. Okay, no, he's talking about some other examples. But okay, one thing I wanted to do, but the problem gets too complicated. You know that data auction is already too complicated. So having a third rational player makes it even more complicated. However, I want to go over it. Let's do it for myself. Just writing the equation. I want to know if I can write the equations even. Because once we have the environment, once we have the thing, we can always, start from the end and do reverse induction for reasoning for the utilities. However, here, when there is a loop, I don't know where to start. Just writing the equation is nice. So let's assume that we have a platform which is even the case in the e-commerce, right? We have the sellers and we have the consumers. So sellers sell physical product, and they get money from the consumers. Consumers share their data, and what they receive is their service, right? Platform either sells data, or in our case, e-commerce can be ranking. How they rank the sellers, and sellers pay, I don't know, some payment. Either it is for the ranking, either it is for the data, or it is part of the percentage of the commission rate for the platform, right? So if I wanna keep it in our data market platform format, right? Here we have an information structure, sigma, which sends action recommendation. Here we have and a payment plan for each seller. Then we have the consumer, which we can still assume it is Corno. I want to say it's Corno. And let's assume consumers have a general, which has also an omega, right? And they have their own types for their costs. But consumer this time care about how much they share about the omega. They can add a noise, omega plus epsilon. How much service they get, I cannot quantify it, but let's assume something. By the way, what is the utility of a consumer? In a Corno game, right? The surplus of the consumer. So here, omega plus epsilon is also a information structure. Tau, we can rate it by tau. You may say they receive some money for this. Right, so we have a formula for consumer's utility, by the way. Overleaf coordination. Because where is actually this looks really good because it kind of give us the price of the privacy for to assume instead of omega they send omega plus epsilon. Now everything changes here. That will be a complicated game. Actually, I may do it just as a homework for myself. I don't want to publish it, like I write a paper about it, but it's very interesting. Consumer's utility is this. This is not the consumer's utility. Oh, consumer's utility, I think it's in the section 2. This is seller I's utility. Ah, okay, this is it. Consumer utility micro foundation. quadratic utility function U and concave function of the n goods quantity U of Q. What is that alpha and beta? Is it the same? The welfare of the firm is this. Exposed utility at the market clearing price is. But what is this alpha? Is it the same? Oh, okay. I think Thibault updated the text. No, it hasn't. But this alpha beta and the other alpha beta should be the same. No, what is this alpha beta? So that's it. Okay, consumer utility is this. I don't care. There are some alpha and beta, alright. It's just distraction right now. Consumer utility micro foundation, U of Q is alpha over 2 sigma qi squared plus beta sigma qi qj, and it is for kernel, plus gamma sigma qi, right? Let's assume there is no payment for the information that consumers provide to the platform. Then utility of consumer will be expected of UQ, right? And let's assume we are not gonna make it at auction. We are gonna let the consumers give us omega, the platform omega plus epsilon, and platform knows everything about the distribution of epsilon. Epsilon distribution. Oh, sorry. All right. So we are in this situation that we have omega. We added omega plus epsilon. Platform has omega plus epsilon. It gives qi to the firms. They have their own theta I. We have a sigma which gives q given omega plus epsilon and theta, and there are some payments, and here we have u of q, and we have the payments from the consumers and money they make, which we showed here UI, right? This is u, pick u, this is UI. And epsilon is fixed. We know, common knowledge. I'm not making it more complicated. What is the sigma epsilon squared that if we let consumers choose, consumers have control over sigma squared, epsilon squared. Now what matters really is the timing of the game. How is it? Previously, it was when there was no communication between, like there was no additional noise to the omega. It was buyers or firms observe their type, platform observes omega. But before that, okay, zero, platforms, state sigma, and payments. Then game starts, platform observes omega, firms observe theta I, firms decide to participate or not, then they send, then they receive action recommendation and payment. Now our beginning stage has a problem. We can't say omega sigma is set by platform, and also epsilon is set. One option is that zero epsilon distribution is set by consumer, sigma and payment set by platform. One, consumers observe omega, platform observes omega plus epsilon, firms observe theta I, 2, and decide to participate or not. And then once we say epsilon set is by consumer, sigma epsilon squared is announced. I like sigma squared epsilon be announced first, then, so it is 0.5 sigma and p's. Yeah, definitely. We cannot, without having sigma epsilon squared, we cannot set sigma and p. Or we can, and then, okay, action recommendations and competition here. Utilities, realized, right? Are realized. That's it. One other thing is that you can say this is one approach, right? This is one approach. Second scheme can be 2b can be 0 is platform. Instead of information and payment, also adds a parameter sigma epsilon squared that says if the consumer gives me this sigma epsilon squared, my sigma will be this. Sigma depends on omega plus epsilon, sigma epsilon squared that they set, and the type you give me. Then Then 0.5 epsilon is set by platform, by the consumers, right? So there are two of them. There are two of them. In the first one, in the A, we can say platform, the consumers have the first hand or the initiator. They set their sigma epsilon squared, and they know for their sigma epsilon squared, platform will design a sigma and p. In the second one, platform gives option to the, well, they're quite similar. Are A and B the same thing? So platform says, okay, I will give you a menu to the consumers. And in a sense also option to the users or firms or data buyers, that I give you this and you choose what sigma epsilon squared you want to pick. Like, okay, in the B timing, platform has the upper hand. And he says, yeah, whoever starts the game has the upper hand all the time. It's a Stackelberg game. So these two gaming are different. And that's interesting. Both of them are interesting. Then the rest is similar. Then consumers observes omega, platform omega plus epsilon, and that's it. And we can have a talk on privacy here. I mean, even one of them, studying one of them is beautiful, and I want to do that actually. I want to do that. I want to see how it looks. Like once we have all of these bullshits, I think it's easy to compute this one. Anyways, I wrote it down. I hope I can have the time to do it.
Optimal contracts under revenue. Okay, so that's kind of a neat connection between core economic concept of incentive aligned in a contract.
Or I will get into my ranking problem and try to make a loop.
How to gather statistical evidence, which are e-values, which have been developed for completely different purposes. We now have, so I'm not going to get into the mathematical theory, but we have a paper that goes through it in all the gory detail. There are some interesting applications emerging for this, and one of them is this domain of federated learning. So again, federated learning is mostly about, Google's and et cetera, gathering data up and, worrying about the compression issues and the privacy issue and all that. Again, no economics is involved. But I hope you can sort of see this as a natural fit here. If you think about this as a principal-agent problem, the principal wants to get the agent to do something, which is gather data, and maybe gather high-quality data. And the agent knows how much it costs them locally to gather the data and how high quality there is. So there's totally an information asymmetry, and there is a overall contract you can write for this. All right, so we have a paper that's from last year on incentivizing data sharing and federated learning. And again, we have several other papers en route. This is a big topic for us. So you can tell me how much more time I have so I can calibrate here? I did, 15 after? 20 minutes, okay, I got plenty of time. Okay, so I'm gonna move on. That was a piece of work that brings together statistics with incentive theory. I think this is going to, a lot of people are going to be working on this. A lot of people already are. It's not completely empty of people. But the main area where incentives have come back together with learning has been auctions. So there are big literatures on that, learning of auctions. And that's great, but auctions are this symmetric situation, and they're more kind of like for the Googles of the world trying to make money by having these symmetric players, fight it out, like advertising markets. I think this one is more human. I think that this principal-agent paradigm, it really fits lots of situations. Information is distributed, we all know that, and information does not necessarily just want to flow, right? Information only wants to flow if the incentives are aligned, right? And once the incentives are aligned, then good things can start to happen, and you can let the little player have leverage. That's a nice
sentence. Information wants to flow if incentives are aligned. If I give you information but it hurts me, I don't want to do that.
And the big player has to pay some information rent. And we want to characterize all that in statistical terms. That's been done in Bayesian, quote-unquote, terms, but not statistical. So for the younger people in the room, I want to encourage you. I think this is a real opportunity to get engaged in something that's just starting. All right, this part of the talk is more about statistics and kind of the counterpoint of statistics with all the predictive machine learning we're seeing. Okay, so in some sense, the predictive machine learning we're seeing is just statistics. I totally believe that. It's non-parametric statistics. It's gradient descent, for God's sake. It has wonderful, interesting properties, and those should be studied and all that. But it is just statistics. And as a statistician, you look at a predictive model and you say, yes, but. It makes predictions, but maybe those predictions are just not so good, or maybe for some purpose, they make the wrong decision. And should I not worry about that? So the talk I gave here the last time, several years ago now, was on uncertainty quantification and conformal prediction, and that is becoming a thing. So controlling the size of the confidence interval has become a thing. Even if the predicting engine, you really don't know much about, a black box prediction can lead to quantifiable confidence intervals. So that's great. But the remaining topic is the bias, okay? We worry a lot in statistics about variance. That's usually the thing we have to worry the most about, and we're kind of mostly unbiased or close to unbiased. But in this new world, we're going to be hugely biased. I'm going to show you empirical examples. I hope will convince you of that.
Protein powder.
You all know that we have these predictive engines now. So, for example, predicting the 3D structure of a protein is, let's not call it solved, but it's a huge jump in accuracies. And many other areas of science are being changed by the availability of these predictive engines, and that's definitely cascading and continuing on. Now, the scale is interestingly is wildly off in some ways. There are hundreds of millions of amino acid sequences whose structures have been predicted by AlphaFold, hundreds of millions, right? There are hundreds of thousands of amino acid sequences whose structure is known crystallographically. Because this is a huge imbalance, and it's only going to continue as these things kind of feed back on themselves in positive feedback loops.
What?
Structures, right? There are hundreds of thousands of amino acid sequences whose structure is known crystallographically.
I should take a video here. All right, I will.
The 3D structure of a protein is, let's not call it solved, but it's a huge jump in accuracies. And many other areas of science are being changed by the availability of these predictive engines, and that's definitely cascading and continuing on. Now, the scale is interestingly is wildly off in some ways. There are hundreds of millions of amino acid sequences whose structures have been predicted by AlphaFold, hundreds of millions, right? There are hundreds of thousands of amino acid sequences whose structure is known crystallographically.
So we have hundreds of millions prediction, but there are hundreds of thousands of them that exist.
Because this is a huge imbalance, and it's only going to continue as these things kind of feed back on themselves in positive feedback loops. Is that good or bad? Well, I'm not gonna. I think it's probably overall good, but we got to worry about how we do this. In particular, you're starting to see papers now that will study a phenomenon in biology using the predictions from AlphaFold as the raw data. Okay, so here's a paper, it's a good paper, just say, that studied originally this problem, very interesting problem of protein phosphorylation and intrinsic disorder. So some proteins have regions in which the quantum mechanics is strong enough that you actually see intrinsic disorder, and that was kind of viewed as a fun phenomenon for a long time. It's now realized that's actually a real signal inside of the DNA. And phosphorylation is somehow connected to that.
Crazy.
And so it's a real signal pathway.
I like to do this kind of
disordered.
thing. I want to be able to go everywhere, like biology, work with a biologist, produce something.
And so there's now,
I love that.
large interest in this. In 2004, when this paper first appeared, there just was not enough structures to actually test this. Okay, so you
Once in every 5 years, you should change your venue. That's it.
a statistical test on that. All right, but now with all the AlphaFold predictions, we've got 200 million, structures. They're not real structures, but they're predictions. They're pretty good. The accuracy.
You learn something, and based on the things you learned, you add to help other people. You learn from them. You do a project, go next to another project.
It really is high.
Yeah,
The
this
machine
is
learning,
fucking life.
accuracy is very high. All right, that's great. So now you have a paper then in 2022 that comes out and says we're going to actually assess that old prediction. We're going to do an odds ratio, a hypothesis test between association or non-association of these two phenomena. And the interesting fact is their analysis only used the predictions from AlphaFold. No data was used. Okay, it still might be correct. It's just that's a little worrying, and that's going to happen.
So they're assuming AlphaFold is
Surely
right.
more and more. All right, so they replaced in their odds ratio the probability of intrinsically disordered region given phosphorylation. That odds ratio, they just replaced the IDRs with predicted IDRs and went on their merry way. All right, so you probably have other examples of this. Here's some of the ones that we collected. Access, electricity access, satellite imagery, phenotyping, and so on, all being used with machine learning predictions these days. Okay. Now, AlphaFold does make errors, and it's not hard to find some. Here's one. Okay, that's a pretty serious error right there. Okay, and so I'm going to show you on the next slide, probably the most important slide of the entire talk. We did this with AlphaFold, the entire output of AlphaFold, and I'll just show the slide. All right.
Actually, this Bayesian structure is better here, I feel. if we look at that, my first paper, right? It was like binary 0, 1. You couldn't add, to be honest, any noise. And you can say with this probability I switch, there's a miscommunication. And the other guy has control over it. They both can be studied. Alright.
So this is that odds ratio I alluded to, the probability of intrinsic disorder given phosphorylation.
But okay, how would you define? The only thing is that you need to come up with a utility for the consumer in the binary competition game too, and that is not very interesting. Maybe this one we have a utility already.
You know, and we did a huge Monte Carlo simulation. So we have a notion of a true odds ratio in our simulation. That's the dotted line right there. We took the methodology where you just use the predictions of AlphaFold, and we built a confidence interval for that. We got a very, very narrow confidence interval, that little gold region there, showing that it was pretty convinced of its accuracy. Problem is, it's not even remotely close to covering the truth. There's no 95 step
I got into my head. I can use help of ChatGPT to do project, hopefully.
Okay, and so I'm going to show you on the next slide, probably the most important slide of the entire talk. We did this with AlphaFold, the entire output of AlphaFold, and I'll just show the slide. All right. So this is that odds ratio I alluded to, the probability of intrinsic disorder given phosphorylation. And we did a huge Monte Carlo simulation. So we have a notion of a true odds ratio in our simulation. That's the dotted line right there. We took the methodology where you just use the predictions of AlphaFold, and we built a confidence interval for that. We got a very, very narrow confidence interval, that little gold region there, showing that it was pretty convinced of its accuracy. Problem.
What ChatGPT gives us is just we want to develop raw intelligence. The rest is just we can learn.
Is it's not even remotely close
and
to
it is
covering
mathematics actually.
There's no 95%.
Not really, not mathematics. You need to have some basic
guarantee appropriate for that. It's just wrong, badly wrong.
Mathematics is really good.
All right, oops. So if you ask a classical statistician in these companies, like Genentech or whatever, what will you do there? They say, I'm just going to throw out those predictions. I can't. I don't. They're uncalibrated. So they would just use the labeled data, the gold truth, and they do, and they get that gray region. So it is a confidence interval which does cover the truth. The 95% guarantee is being met, but it's huge, right? And moreover, it even includes 1. So it includes the null hypothesis that there's no effect. Okay, so those are both really pretty seriously bad answers. We have a new approach we call prediction-powered inference, which is the green thing. And I'm going to be trying to show you how we get the green thing. Okay, so this looks at first glance a little bit like semi-supervised learning, but it's not. You have labeled data, small amounts with XY labels. You also have predictions coming from some prediction engine that someone else perhaps has built. You also have a vast amount of unlabeled data. You don't have the Y primes there, but you do have the predictions still. Okay, so this again looks a little like semi-supervised, but as you'll see, it's not going to be that. Now we have some estimand that we care about. Let's call that theta star. And we'd like to construct a confidence set that's valid for theta star. So, okay, we're not trying to make a better prediction. We're not trying to just change the prediction, augment it, or and so on, and improve it in a semi-supervised way. What we want to do is do confidence intervals. So I want a confidence interval, CPP, prediction powered, that contains the truth with a certified probability, 1 minus alpha. All right, so here's the 2 cartoon approaches. The classical approach would just use only the labeled data. Can't trust this machine learning stuff. It would be valid, but lose power. The imputed approach would wildly treat these labels as gold standard labels and get something which is highly powerful but invalid. Okay, how can we get the best of both worlds? Okay, so again, there's the picture we're trying to aim for. Let me, before I get into show you how we do it, I want to show
by the way, I like it. He has like theory, but he also, He's not mental masturbating, right? He implements those ideas.
Other examples. I think the examples are the most fun part of this. So this is electronic voting. We're just trying to estimate the mean, the number of voters for one candidate versus another candidate. This is a particular race that happened in an assembly race in California, in San Francisco. We just say this is the code that we wrote to do this. I want to partly emphasize how simple the algorithm I'm about to show you is. It adds that little clip of code there to do the prediction-powered things. Again, you can see that there is an imputed result, which is quite far off. This is using a computer vision algorithm to impute, what was
wow,
the
look at this guy, dude. Incentive-aware recommender systems in two-sided markets. That's crazy. Protein mining, dude. Fair allocation in dynamic mechanical design. Your operation research. Recommender system, where was the recommender system? Where is the recommenders? ACM transient recommender system. Oh, address of Allah. Fuck, dude. Oh, okay, this one. Fair allocation in dynamic mechanics. Let's get them, brother. $38 fucking pages. Yes. Damn. This is full of mathematics. I love to see if they implement. To be honest, I don't have the energy to read this kind of work right now. I have to publish shorter papers. Technical proofs, that's a big paper actually. PDF. Fallah went to 36 papers. Too much mathematics. It's just I don't have time to read it. This looks like my work. Is it? Did they cite us? Well, this doesn't look like my work. It's just a normal auction. No, this is not. This is my work actually. Okay. Anyways, so they are doing works, but to be honest, I rather not read their work unless we are working together. That's the thing. Everybody is publishing so many paper, like everybody wants to be a YouTuber or like think people don't have time to see other people's videos. So if you wanna do something, you need to like look at these mathematics. They're so fucking big. I'm not gonna read you. Unless we wanna do something together, I will listen to you, you will listen to me, and we start a new project. I know that they are in the market. Yeah, and like they don't have also a big. I'm not gonna publish a paper on your paper. That's too much. Yeah, the best thing is that once we have a conversation, if I'm not gonna see you, like I publish a paper, you publish a paper, alright. One time I always give you the chance to tell me what your work is. But it's not that okay, I always read your works and you don't give me any opportunity. That sucks. I'm not gonna do it. Unless your work is just pure value.
Ballots have been damaged a little bit. Computer vision's pretty good at making a prediction in those cases. So if you throw them in, it'll give you a confidence interval. Problematically, you don't cover the truth, however. And again, we're able to fix that here. You can see the width of the confidence interval with our new approach is much, much smaller than that with the classical for different values of n. Here's a nice example that Anastasios did. I think I showed the pictures and I didn't give the names, but Anastasios Angelopoulos is one of the grad students working on this. An interesting problem in astrophysics is counting spiral galaxies with the new telescopes. And computer vision will make predictions about whether a galaxy is spiral or not. But again, we want to do science. We want to have confidence intervals on these things. And you know, here, the classical approach is probably the better one. The gray, this is different conditions. The gray one is covering the truth, and it's pretty big, but not terribly big. But again, the predictions alone give you a very highly biased result. This is a gene expression problem where we're trying to use transformers, this latest kind of technology, to estimate median gene expression under different promoters, different upstream regions. And again,
it's important to read other people's who work in your area so you can have productive works together. Yeah, that's good actually. To have some people, like three other research groups, that you are doing your research, once in a while you study other. Otherwise, it's just too, that's again making a celebrity group for yourself. Because so many people are doing research. I don't have time to read one of those papers I showed you. But if we can just share our thoughts once in a while, paper is so inefficient.
Over there should hope convince you there's still an issue. There's an issue also here. And I think this I got two more examples. California census, this is just logistic regression with census data using a boosting model. You can see the imputed result is terribly off. And then last example is my favorite one. This is Clara Fanjang, who works on many kind of applied stat problems, including plankton counting. So if you go out into the ocean, you like to assess the health of the ocean. One thing you do is try to decide how much plankton there is versus detritus. So that's detritus and that's plankton. And it's time consuming to do this. Computer vision algorithms have been developed, and of course they may have some errors. So you do the same kind of thing, and again, you get errors here, and in fact, it's only the prediction-powered inference one which gives you coverage of the truth. Okay. All right, so let me give you a little flavor of how this is being done, and I'm going to show you a derivation on one of the pages. Really, this is a pretty simple idea. It's not completely new in statistics. I would say that small sample census theory has some element to this, but it's not been yet realized as kind of how general this idea is. So in some sense, it looks like bias correction.
That's again similar.
But we're not trying to just correct the bias of an estimator. We're trying to get a confidence interval under biased data. So that's a little bit different. All right, so what we do is we identify what we call a rectifier. It is a quantity which is a population quantity. All right, it is the bias in some estimator. So I have some truth, theta star. I have some estimator, theta twiddle, F. And if I had infinite data, there would maybe still be a difference between the quantum that, right? Then what technology to bias estimation problems and whatever now returns. It's, you know, all the name for it might this little bit out of it. Hierarchical model want to do in most problems. Maybe another way to say this.
Now, I want to do a little disclaimer. I'm a proponent of AI. I mean, I'm a techie. My daughter even has a master's in data science and works in the field. So, but my due diligence compels me to sort of play the devil's advocate in all of this, right? And so my understanding is that there's another gentleman who's also known as another godfather of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, who just quit Google, so that he can speak freely about concerns with this rapidly developing technology. And his work is more on neural networks, and it teaches AI how to process data, much similar to how the brain processes data. And the concern is that if we take a step back at the 50,000 foot level and look at AI, the concern is that that AI will become more intelligent than humans, and the time frame for this was to occur in about 50 years, but they've since updated it and said that within 5 or 10 years this is going to occur. And things that could happen if things like that occur, they've been saying is that it could learn how to how humans manipulate others to sort of sway public opinion. And God knows we have good teachers out there that sway public opinion right now, and so that it could sway opinion on wars, on elections, and so on and so forth. And to me, what really comes forward to is when I was a kid, I watched this movie, 2001: Space Odyssey, how the computer, and really, I mean, that was based on AI. And so, can we get into a situation? My concern is as being playing the devil's advocate, can we get into a situation where AI sort of takes control where we have no control?
So I'm not quite sure where we should go with this. I've known Jeffrey Hinton for 50 years. I profoundly disagree with what he's been saying in the last few days. Okay, first of all, I think it's intellectually dishonest to say that this is based on understanding of neuroscience. It's just intellectually dishonest. That's just false. Okay. Secondly, most of the people in the field look at ChatGPT and think it's a very interesting tool. It will do things like change the college essay. You're going to have to do things. You can't teach people to write just by asking them to write an essay anymore. You'll have to do more creative things like, here's an essay that ChatGPT wrote. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with the reasoning? Make it better. We still have to think.
We still have
Our
to
thinking
think.
ability is so far beyond what ChatGPT can do, and that's going to be true for the rest of our life. Okay? The message I'm trying to give you is that if we open this up, not just to Google, where Jeff Hinton was working, to develop it and sell it and make a lot of money and control everything, if we open this up to everybody, including social sciences, including humanities, including...
He sounds like a... he sounds like a computer science communist. He doesn't... Well, everybody doesn't. I think, yeah, that's true. Like these companies, Google, what is it, OpenAI, all of them are getting so big in many aspects. They are more important than governments. And if in a democracy, people have control over the government, for these big companies that affect every aspect of our life, in every day, in every hour, in every minute, well, we need to have some control over them.
In cognitive scientists, including economists, everybody, including everybody throughout the third world, throughout all the world, and make it a human endeavor.
He's a very nice
we can
person,
have control
actually.
over it, just like other powerful kinds of technology. We had control over electricity. There was fear that electricity was going to ruin humanity. You have no idea. I've looked back. Right now, so we want to be Pollyanna that this just stuff is great. That's probably part of the problem, is that a lot of these AI people, when I said AI people, I don't even think of myself as one. I'm an engineer and a scientist. I want to build these things right and build them so they're safe to people. Like civil engineering, people built buildings and bridges that didn't fall down. That was important to do. The same thing has got to be done here, but it has to be done in a sober way, that we're not creating super intelligences. We're not going to, the science fiction is not where it's heading. And we have to think about sober. So to me, as an academic, it really is critical to come back to the university and say, let's do this right. Let's educate people about it, what it is, what it's not, and not the exuberance of single individuals
very
who are
smart
quite
dude,
sure of
by
their
the
own
way.
genius.
The way he talks is just, yeah, he's a smart. All right. And I have to complete this one as well. All right, we listened to Michael Jordan, which was something I wanted to do. Nice talk, very promising for myself. Let's see what else Eson sent me instead of playing counter. Oh shoot, 2:43. I have to go. Yeah, I have to go. I cannot even see what Eson sent. All right. Let's say goodbye. We will be back. Eson works. It's very interesting. If this project works, that will be amazing. It will be a change of venue for me. I love it. Guys, if you are, don't wish me luck with this one. Thank you. Wish me luck, and I want to be the next Michael Jordan. I want to be the next Munzardale. Well, I think I can be. All right, they're big people. They're big names.